I saw my daughter freezing on Christmas while his family laughed near the fireplace. I didn't plan to come home on Christmas Eve. The schedule said I should have been 3 states away, finishing the last week of winter training with the national team. But practice ended early, the gym lights went dark, and a stubborn instinct, the same one that made me step between 2 sparring students before a punch landed, told me to stop waiting for the right moment to see my daughter. Hit that subscribe button and tap the bell icon so you never miss our latest uploads. I booked the flight and kept it quiet. No call. No warning. I wanted the surprise to be simple. Emily opening the door and smiling the way she used to when she was little, and I'd come back from tournaments with my coat smelling like mats and peppermint gum. Boise hit me with a cold the second I stepped outside the airport. The air was sharp enough to sting my nostrils. Snow covered the sidewalks in clean sheets, and the wind shoved at my shoulders like it wanted to turn me around. I pulled my collar up and flagged a taxi. Meadow Creek, 12th Street, I told the driver, and tried to relax as the heater clicked and whined. Halfway there, the taxi slowed at an intersection controlled by a traffic officer in a reflective vest. Under the street lamp I recognized him immediately. Jake Morales, one of my former Taekwondo students. He had grown into his uniform, but the same steady focus sat in his eyes. I lowered the window. "Jake." He turned, then smiled. "Coach Rose. Still working holidays?" I asked. "Somebody's got to." His smile lingered, then faltered. "You're here for Emily?" "Yes. Surprise visit." Jake hesitated, the way a person does when they're holding a truth by the edge and it's cutting into their palm. "She's okay." My stomach tightened. "Why are you asking that?" He shook his head quickly, forcing the smile back into place. "It's nothing. Just drive safe." The light changed. The taxi rolled forward, and Jake stayed behind in the glass, watching like he wanted to follow. I called Emily. No answer. I texted. Nothing. I told myself she was busy, cooking, setting the table, laughing with her husband's family. Emily had always tried hard to make things feel normal, even when normal cost her more than it should. When we reached her neighborhood, I asked the driver to stop a short distance away. I wanted to walk the last stretch and feel the snow under my boots. The street was lined with houses dressed in warm lights, each one glowing like it had something good to protect. Emily's house glowed too. Through the large front window I could see people gathered around a long table and a bright fireplace. I recognized them from wedding photos and awkward holiday calls. The Whitlocks. Harold, my son-in-law's father, sat straight-backed at the head like he owned the room. Evelyn held a glass with a practiced smile. Abigail leaned close to someone, laughing, and 2 children bounced in their seats. It looked festive. It looked safe. Except Emily wasn't there. I shifted left and right, trying to find my daughter among the moving shoulders and lifted glasses. Nothing. No familiar face. No quick smile. No sign of her at all. The closer I got, the more details sharpened. The shine of the ornaments on the tree, the way the firelight painted everyone's faces, the easy confidence of people who believed the world would always make room for them. I wanted to tell myself Emily was just in the kitchen. She loved to host, even when hosting exhausted her. She'd learned early that a neat table and a sweet smile could keep arguments from starting. That habit, making peace, had followed her into adulthood like a shadow. I stepped onto the first porch step and paused, hand hovering near the doorbell. A mother knows the sound of her child's laughter, but she also knows the sound of her silence. Something about the silence inside that window felt wrong. The laughter had an edge to it, like it was aimed at someone who wasn't allowed to laugh back. Then a sharper burst of voices broke through the glass. The wind helped carry them, pushing a few words into my ears as if the night itself wanted me to hear. Harold's voice came first, low and amused. "You can't build a family on excuses." A woman, Abigail, snickered. "She's always got some episode when there's work to do." Ryan replied, and the ease in his tone made my stomach turn. "I keep telling her to toughen up. My mom's been patient, But, honestly, how long can we pretend it's normal? Evelyn answered with a sigh that sounded like a performance. We've done everything. Roof over her head, food on the table, and she still acts like she's the victim. I didn't hear every word, but I heard enough. The dismissive cadence, the way they spoke about her like she was a problem to manage, not a person. My fingertips went numb, and not from the cold. A memory flashed, Emily at 16, standing in our kitchen, flour on her nose, laughing because she'd burnt the first batch of cookies. It's fine, she'd said, brushing ash into the trash with a grin. We'll make more. Even then she had been the kind of girl who fixed what broke without asking who broke it. I swallowed hard and forced myself to breathe. I reminded myself that I didn't know what I was hearing, that families bicker, that words get said and then taken back. I reminded myself of a coach's rule. Don't strike before you see the opening. But I couldn't ignore the other rule, the one that mattered more. Protect the smaller body. I stepped closer to the door, trying to catch one more glimpse through the window, and that's when I noticed the front path. It hadn't been shoveled. Not even a quick pass. The snow lay thick and undisturbed, as if no one had needed to go out for anything all day. No errands. No gift runs. No, I forgot the milk. Nothing. The house had been sealed shut like a box, warm for the people inside and unforgiving to anyone left out. My hand curled into a fist. I drew it back, ready to knock again, and that's when the faint whimper slipped out of the dark corner of the porch. Then I heard a sound behind me, soft, thin, almost swallowed by the wind. A whimper. I turned toward the far corner of the porch, where an old chair had been shoved beside a half-buried planter. Emily was curled in that chair like she was trying to become smaller than the cold. Her blouse was too thin for the weather, her hair damp with melted snow, and her hands were tucked under her arms, shaking so hard her shoulders jumped. For one stunned second, my mind refused what my eyes were seeing. Then my body moved. Emily. My voice broke on her name. She lifted her head slowly. Her lips were pale. Her eyes looked far away, as if she'd been staring at the dark for a long time. "Mom," she whispered, like she wasn't sure she was allowed to say it. I yanked off my jacket and wrapped it around her. The cold coming off her skin felt unreal, like touching a metal railing left outside overnight. My fingers fumbled with the zipper. I couldn't get it right. I tried again, breath coming fast, rage rising with every second. "Why are you out here?" I asked, already hating the question because no good answer existed. Emily's teeth clicked as she tried to speak. I needed air. Inside the house, laughter swelled again. Loud, careless. Glass clinked. Someone told a joke, and a deeper voice cut through the rest. Ryan. Comfortable. Relaxed. Relaxed while my daughter froze. Emily's head sagged against my shoulder. I scooped her up, surprised by how light she felt. Her slippers slid off as I lifted her. One dropped into the snow. I didn't stop to grab it. I carried her to the door and knocked hard. Footsteps approached. The door cracked open and Evelyn Whitlock appeared, framed by warmth like she'd stepped out of a picture. Red lipstick. Pearls. A glass in her hand. Her eyes flicked to Emily in my arms and then back to me, cool and measuring. "Oh," she said, stretching the word. "Rose. What a surprise." I didn't smile. "Why is my daughter outside?" Evelyn's eyebrows rose with practiced patience. "She got overwhelmed. You know how she gets." Emily's fingers tightened in my coat, a tiny desperate grip. "I know my daughter," I said. "I don't know this." Evelyn's mouth tightened. "It's a family dinner." Emotions run high. She wanted to cool off. From inside, Ryan stepped into view behind his mother. His collar was loose, his cheeks faintly flushed, a bottle hanging from his hand like it was part of the decor. He looked at me with the kind of lazy disdain people practice until it feels natural. "Rose," he said, "you can't just show up and start drama." I stared at him, then at the warmth behind him. The table crowded with plates, the people who had never once cleared the snow from the front path. "Move," I said. Ryan's lips curled. "Take her home. She's been sulking all day. We're trying to have a nice evening." From deeper in the room, Harold's voice rumbled, smooth and heavy. "Let her mother handle it. Maybe she'll finally teach her some grit." A few people laughed. Not everyone, but enough. Emily flinched in my arms. Her whole body seemed trained to shrink when those voices rose. I kissed her forehead quickly. "I've got you," I whispered. Then I looked Ryan straight in the eye and said the 6 words that had been building in me since I saw her in that chair. "This ends now. Open the door." Ryan blinked, surprised by the calm in my voice. Evelyn started to speak, like she could smooth this over with manners and wine. I didn't give her time. The door was still only half open. I shifted Emily higher, planted my boot, and pushed. The door swung wide and thudded against the wall. Warm air hit my face. The room went silent so fast it felt like someone had snapped a cord. A splash of red wine spilled onto the rug, dark as a fresh bruise. Every head turned. I carried Emily to the couch, lowered her gently, and wrapped my scarf around her shoulders. Then I rubbed her hands between mine to bring the warmth back, the way I used to warm a student's fingers after winter runs. Ryan took a step forward, anger rising. "You don't get to barge in here. This is my house. My daughter lives here," I said. "So do I if she needs me." Harold stood at the head of the table, tall and composed, voice polished like he was used to being believed. "Ms. Rose," he said, "you're disrupting the holiday." "You disrupted my daughter's life," I answered. "Explain why she was left outside in freezing weather." Abigail, arms crossed, rolled her eyes. She stormed out to get attention. Like always. Emily's shoulders tightened under the scarf. The word attention landed on her like a slap. Ryan pointed toward the couch. "She's been acting fragile for months. Always tired. Always sad. We're done catering to it." I turned to Emily and softened my voice. "Sweetheart, tell me what happened." Her lips trembled. She swallowed once, twice. "I dropped a plate," she whispered. "It slipped. I tried to clean it. Harold called me clumsy." Abigail laughed. I started crying. Ryan said I was ruining the mood. Her eyes filled, but she kept going, like she was forcing herself to say the truth out loud. He opened the door and told me to go outside until I could behave. A dropped plate. A normal mistake. Punished like a crime. Ryan scoffed. "That's not." "Stop," I cut in. The word came out sharp enough to slice through the room. Evelyn sipped her wine, expression bored. "She's exaggerating. She always does." The fire crackled. The table sat heavy with untouched food. Faces watched me as if I was the problem for naming what they'd done. In my pocket, my phone felt suddenly heavier, like it had turned into a tool instead of an object. I reached for it anyway. Ryan's eyes narrowed. "What are you doing?" "Calling for help," I said. Emily's head snapped up. "Mom, please." I knelt beside her, keeping my voice low and steady. "I'm not doing this to punish anyone," I whispered. "I'm doing it to protect you." Across the room, Harold's mouth tightened. Evelyn's laugh was thin. "You think the police will arrest us because she sat outside for a while?" I didn't argue. I didn't perform. I simply looked through the front window. On the porch, in the reflection of the glass, a uniform stood in the snow. Jake. He met my gaze, jaw clenched, eyes clear. He gave a small, steady nod, an unspoken promise that I wasn't imagining anything, that someone else had seen the cruelty and could name it too. Emily's breathing hitched beside me, and I felt how hard she was trying not to cry. That effort, holding everything in so no one would accuse her of making a scene, made me angrier than any insult. I had taught athletes to breathe through pain, to keep their eyes up, to refuse surrender. But a home was not a ring. And love was not supposed to feel like endurance training. I looked at the couch, at the way Emily's knees were drawn in. Her shoulders curled forward like she was bracing for another blow made of words. I promised myself, silently and completely, that she would not sleep under this roof tonight. I didn't yet know the exact steps, police report, doctor, lawyer, whatever it took, but I knew the first one. Get her out. Keep her warm. Keep her alive. And if they tried to stop me, they would learn what decades of discipline looks like. I turned back to the Whitlocks, to Ryan, to the glittering glasses and the warm room that had become a cage for my daughter. I understood, with a calm that felt like steel settling into place, that this wouldn't end tonight. But it will begin tonight. I didn't wait for permission. I pulled Emily to her feet slowly, one hand behind her back, the other steadying her elbow the way I'd guide an injured student off the mat. Her legs wobbled, and her face pinched with embarrassment, as if she should apologize for needing to be held up. No, I murmured close to her ear. Not tonight. You don't apologize for surviving. Ryan made a sharp sound in his throat, half laugh, half warning. You're overreacting. I turned my head just enough to look at him without stepping away from my daughter. If your wife's lips are turning pale and her hands are numb, and she's shaking so hard she can't stand, that's not a mood. That's dangerous. Harold's chair scraped on the floor as he shifted. Rose, you're making accusations in front of guests. You mean witnesses, I said. Evelyn lifted her glass as if she were toasting my tone. Don't be dramatic. This is Christmas. Families get tense. A child giggled somewhere by the table, then hushed when an adult shot them a look. The room had the brittle silence of a class right before a fight breaks out, people pretending calm while their eyes track every movement. I reached down to pick up Emily's slipper that had somehow made it inside, damp and sad-looking in my hand. I didn't see the other one. It didn't matter. Shoes could be replaced. My daughter couldn't. I'm taking her, I said, and the simplicity of it seemed to offend them more than any insult. Ryan stepped forward, blocking the path to the door with a posture he probably thought looked authoritative. You can't just remove her. This is her home. Emily flinched at the word home, as if it carried a sting. I let out a slow breath. In the dojo I taught two kinds of control. Control of the body, and control of the moment. The first was about muscles. The second was about choices. I wasn't going to swing. I wasn't going to shout. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of calling me unstable. But I also wasn't going to lose. Move, I said again, quieter this time. Ryan's eyes narrowed. Or what? I didn't answer him. I looked past him to the front window. Jake was still there. He had shifted closer, his shoulders squared against the wind, his gaze fixed on the doorway like he was measuring whether he'd need to intervene. He wasn't barging in. He was waiting. He was respecting the boundary I'd set with my nod, but he was ready to step over it if Emily's safety depended on it. I pulled my phone out and held it where Ryan could see. Or I call 911 and tell them an adult woman has been left outside in freezing temperatures as punishment, and now her husband is trying to prevent her from leaving with her mother. Evelyn scoffed. She wasn't prevented. She can leave any time. Emily's fingers tightened around my sleeve so hard her knuckles went white. That's not what her body says, I replied, and turned my attention to my daughter, speaking loud enough for the room to hear. Emily, do you want to leave? Her eyes darted to Ryan, then to his parents, then to the table of faces that seemed to judge her just by breathing. Her mouth opened, then closed. The old habit, keep the peace, rose like a reflex. I squeezed her hand once. You're safe to answer. Her voice came out thin. Yes. A beat of silence. Then Evelyn sighed, annoyed. Fine. Take her for the night. She'll come crawling back when she realizes how hard life is without help. The words were meant to cut. They didn't. Not because they weren't cruel, but because they revealed exactly how Evelyn measured love, as something you give only when you want obedience. Ryan moved aside with a reluctant step, his jaw tight. "You're poisoning her against us," he muttered. "You don't need my help," I said. "You did that yourself." I guided Emily toward the door. Harold's voice followed us, heavy and calm, like a verdict. "Be careful, Rose. You're walking into legal territory you don't understand." I paused at the threshold and looked back at him. I understand one thing perfectly. If a place makes my daughter afraid to speak, it isn't a home. It's a cage. Then I stepped out into the cold. The air hit us like a wall. Emily gasped, her body trembling again. Jake moved in quickly, opening his coat with a practiced motion and draping part of it over her shoulders without touching her too abruptly. His eyes flicked to mine for confirmation. "Thank you," I said, and meant it. Ryan appeared in the doorway behind us, the warm light framing him like a stage. "Emily," he called, putting false concern into his voice now that there was an audience outside. "You're making a mistake. Come inside." Emily didn't turn. She leaned closer to me, face tucked into the collar of my coat like a child seeking shelter from a storm. Jake's voice cut through the night, firm but controlled. "Sir, step back inside." Ryan stiffened. "Who are you to tell me?" "A police officer on duty," Jake said, and the words landed with a weight Ryan hadn't expected. "And I'm instructing you to step back." Ryan hesitated, eyes calculating. Harold appeared behind him, his presence quiet but commanding. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. He simply stood there, watching, as if memorizing the scene for later. I knew that look. I'd seen it in men who lost a sparring match and promised themselves revenge through paperwork, complaints, and politics. I adjusted my grip on Emily and started down the steps. Snow grabbed at my boots. Emily's feet dragged slightly, her balance still unsteady. "I'll drive you," Jake said, already moving with us. "Where are you staying?" "My apartment near the training center," I answered. Jake nodded once, then looked at Emily. "Do you need medical help right now?" Emily shook her head weakly. "Just warm." "We'll get you warm," I promised. The taxi I'd taken was long gone, but a neighbor's car lights flickered at the corner, and Jake raised his hand. It wasn't a taxi, it was his patrol car parked around the bend, engine idling against the cold. He opened the back door carefully. "It's warm in here. Take your time." Emily slid inside and curled against the seat, her breathing uneven. I climbed in beside her, pulling her into my side, holding her the way I had when she was small and sick with winter fevers. Jake shut the door, then walked around to the driver's seat, posture rigid with professionalism. As we pulled away, I glanced back once. The Whitlock house glowed behind us like a cruel lantern, warm for those inside and indifferent to what it had pushed out. The drive to my apartment felt longer than it was. Emily shivered in waves, and I rubbed her arms, speaking softly about nothing and everything. About the heater, about how the snow looked like powdered sugar, about how she used to steal marshmallows from the hot cocoa before it was ready. She didn't respond much. But she listened. Her eyes stayed open, fixed on a point in the dark, like she was afraid that if she blinked she'd wake up back on that porch. When we arrived, I guided her up the stairs, my body between her and the world, keys shaking in my hand. The apartment was modest. Small living room, simple kitchen, the kind of place built for a single person with busy days and tired nights. But it was warm, and it was mine, and that meant it was safe. The moment the door shut behind us, Emily's shoulders sagged. She slid onto the couch as if her bones had finally remembered they were allowed to rest. I pulled blankets from the closet, thick ones, old ones, the kind that smelled faintly of detergent and thyme. I wrapped her like a burrito, tucking the edges around her feet. Then I went to the kitchen and put water on for cocoa, the routine steadying my hands. Jake stood near the door, removing his gloves, looking slightly out of place in my small living room, like a man used to streetlights and radios suddenly dropped into a private world. "You can sit," I told him. "I'm okay," he replied, but his eyes didn't leave Emily. Emily's voice came out fragile. "Jake, You didn't have to. He softened. Yes, I did. When I brought the cocoa, the steam curled up between us. Emily cradled the mug with both hands, absorbing warmth through her palms. She took a sip and winced, then tried again. The sweetness seemed to bring her back a fraction, like her body recognized comfort and didn't know whether to trust it. I sat beside her and kept my voice gentle. Talk to me, sweetheart. Not everything at once. Just start. Emily stared into the mug as if the swirling chocolate could arrange her thoughts into something safe to say. It wasn't always like this, she whispered. At first, Ryan was kind. Then what changed? I asked. Her throat moved as she swallowed hard. After the first loss, he acted like it was something that happened to him, not to both of us. He'd get quiet and angry. His mom started making comments. Some women are built for motherhood and some aren't. My jaw tightened. Emily's eyes flicked up to mine. I tried so hard. I went to doctors. I followed every instruction. I stopped drinking coffee. I stopped doing everything I liked. I kept thinking if I just did it right, I could fix it. I reached for her hand. You don't fix grief by being perfect. She let out a small laugh that wasn't a laugh at all. They said I was selfish. That I wanted attention. That I liked being the sad one, so people would feel sorry for me. Jake's hands curled into fists at his sides. He didn't speak, but the air around him changed, tenser, hotter, like he was trying to keep anger from spilling out. Emily's voice grew thinner. When I couldn't get out of bed, Ryan would open the curtains and say, "Look, the world is still turning. Stop being dramatic." I breathed slowly, forcing myself to stay steady. "Emily," I said, "what happened tonight? Why did they put you outside?" She hesitated. Then the words came out in a rush, as if once started they couldn't be stopped. Harold made a toast. He said family was built on strength and legacy. Then he looked right at me and said, "Some people contribute, and some people just take." Everyone laughed. My stomach twisted. I tried to keep smiling, she continued, voice cracking. I tried. I thought if I just stayed quiet it would pass. But Abigail started talking about her kids, and Evelyn said something like, "At least our line continues." And Ryan. She stopped, pressing her lips together, eyes filling. What did Ryan do? I asked, voice low. Emily's breath shuddered. He didn't defend me. He joined in. He said, "Mom's right. Emily needs to accept reality." My vision blurred. I wiped my cheek quickly before she could see. "I'm sorry," I said, though it felt too small to hold what she'd lived through. Emily shook her head, the blanket shifting. I kept thinking maybe it was my fault. Maybe if I cooked better, if I smiled more, if I didn't cry, if I didn't. Her words tangled. I don't even know who I am anymore. I put my arm around her shoulders, feeling how light she was beneath the blanket. "You're Emily," I said. "You're my daughter. And you're not going back there tonight." A quiet knock came at the door. Jake's radio crackled faintly at his belt. He glanced toward the peephole, then looked back at me. "Probably nothing," he said, but his body tensed. He opened the door carefully. A large envelope slid inside, pushed by the wind or by a hand that had already vanished down the hall. Jake picked it up and looked at it, then at me. My pulse spiked. "What is it?" He didn't open it right away. He handed it to me like it was evidence. I tore it open. Inside was a single piece of paper with messy handwriting. "Stop interfering. You'll regret it." Emily's eyes widened. Her hand flew to her mouth. "They're going to." "No," I interrupted firmly, crumpling the paper in my fist. "They're going to learn they can't scare me." Jake's voice was controlled, professional. "Keep that," he said, nodding at the paper. "Don't throw it away. It matters." I forced myself to uncrumple it, smoothing it out on the table like it was a strange holiday card. "Of course it matters," I said. Everything matters now. Emily's breath came fast. Mom, I don't want trouble. I don't want a fight. I turned to face her fully. Listen to me. Trouble already found you. You didn't invite it. You didn't earn it. And you don't have to carry it alone. Her eyes filled, and she looked away. They'll win, she whispered. Jake spoke quietly, as if offering a rope instead of a command. Not if we document everything. Emily blinked. Document. I nodded. Everything. Dates. Messages. Anything they say. Anything they do. We stop letting them rewrite your life. Her shoulders shook, and for a second I thought she was about to break. Then she whispered, almost like a confession. I'm scared of him when he's angry. The room went still. I kept my voice soft, but my words were iron. Has he ever hurt you physically? Emily hesitated, then shook her head. No. He grabs my arm sometimes. Hard. But mostly it's the way he talks. The way he looks at me like I'm a disappointment he has to tolerate. I nodded slowly. That's still harmful. Emily's eyes squeezed shut. I thought if I could just be better, it would stop. I took her hands in mine, warming them. You were never the problem, I said. Their cruelty is the problem. Jake cleared his throat gently. Coach, I should file an incident report for tonight. The porch. The threat note. It's a start. I looked at him, grateful. Do it. Emily's head snapped up. No, if you do that, they'll be furious. They're already furious, I replied. They just don't like being seen. Jake nodded once, already in that calm officer mindset. I'll write what I observed. I'll state the temperature if we can confirm it. I'll include your condition, Emily, shivering, pale, exposure symptoms. It's factual. Emily swallowed, trembling again, but this time the trembling wasn't from cold. It was from the fear of consequences. I leaned in. Sweetheart, I said, you've spent too long paying the price for their behavior. Tonight, they start paying the price for their choices. Emily stared at me like she wanted to believe, like the idea was both comforting and terrifying. What happens now? She whispered. I looked around my small apartment, the old couch, the family photos on the wall, the little kitchen table that had hosted 1,000 quiet meals alone. I imagined turning that table into a war room, covered in papers, dates, notes, proof. Now, I realized, it wasn't about revenge. It was about protection. It was about reclaiming a life that had been stolen in tiny pieces. Each insult, each dismissal, each cold night made to feel like a fault. We breathe, I said. We rest tonight. Tomorrow we start building your way out. Jake's gaze stayed steady. And you won't do it alone. Emily's eyes shimmered. She lowered her head and finally let herself cry, quietly, exhaustedly, like a dam opening after holding too much for too long. I wrapped my arms around her and held on, feeling her heartbeat against my chest. Outside, the wind kept howling through Boise's streets, rushing past warm houses and shining lights like it didn't care who was safe and who wasn't. But inside my apartment, for the first time in a long time, Emily was not alone in the cold. And somewhere behind the comfort, behind the blankets and the cocoa, a new certainty settled into my bones. They had threatened me. Good. Because now they knew I'd shown up. And I wasn't leaving. Emily slept fitfully that night, drifting in and out like someone afraid the dark might grab her again if she let go completely. I stayed on the couch beside her, wrapped in a sweater, listening to the slow rhythm of her breathing and the occasional hitch that told me her dreams weren't kind. Every time she stirred, my body tensed, ready to soothe her back, the way a mother never really forgets how to do. When dawn finally crept in through the blinds, Boise looked deceptively peaceful. The snow had softened overnight, the street below quiet and pale. If someone had looked in from the outside, they might have thought nothing was wrong. Just another winter morning. Just another apartment. I knew better. I made coffee quietly, the familiar motions anchoring me. The smell filled the kitchen, warm and bitter. I poured myself a mug I barely touched and sat at the small table, staring at the crumpled note from the night before. Stop interfering. You'll regret it. The handwriting was uneven, rushed, like it had been written with anger instead of thought. Good, I thought. Anger makes people sloppy. Emily woke just after 7. She sat up slowly, eyes swollen, hair tangled, the blanket sliding off her shoulders. For a second she looked confused, then her gaze landed on me, and recognition flooded in, relief, fear, shame, all tangled together. You're still here, she said softly. I'm not going anywhere, I replied. She nodded, as if committing the fact to memory. I don't feel cold anymore. That's because you're safe, I said, then caught myself. Safe wasn't a permanent state yet. It was a goal. I made her toast and eggs. She ate a few bites mechanically, chewing like it was a chore she didn't want to fail. I didn't push her to finish. Control had been taken from her long enough. Here she would decide. Jake called mid-morning. His voice was professional, but I could hear the edge under it. I filed the report, he said. Documented the temperature, the porch exposure, Emily's condition. I also logged the note. Emily stiffened when she heard his voice through the phone. I watched her carefully, noting the way her shoulders rose and fell too fast. Thank you, I said. What happens next? There may be a welfare check later today, Jake replied. Standard follow-up. And, word travels. The Whitlocks won't like this. They don't have to like it, I said. Jake paused. Coach, I want to be clear. This could get ugly. They have connections. They may try to intimidate you. I glanced at Emily. She was staring at the table, fingers tracing invisible lines in the wood. They already tried, I said. We're ready. After the call, Emily finally spoke. They'll blame me, she whispered. They always do. I sat across from her, resting my hands flat on the table. Then we make sure the truth is louder than their blame. She looked up, eyes uncertain. How? I took a deep breath. We start with facts. And we don't rush. That afternoon we went to a therapist Jake had recommended. Someone outside the Whitlock social circle, someone with no reason to bend. The office was warm and neutral, filled with soft light and quiet colors. Emily sat curled into the chair, arms folded like a shield. As the session unfolded, I watched my daughter struggle to put words to experiences she'd spent years minimizing. Every time she started to excuse their behavior, they didn't mean it. I was probably too sensitive, the therapist gently redirected her. What did you feel at that moment? She asked. Emily hesitated, then whispered. Small. Like I was. In the way. The words hit me harder than any insult I'd heard from the Whitlocks. My daughter had been reduced to feeling like an inconvenience in her own life. By the end of the session, Emily looked drained but lighter, like someone who had finally set down a heavy bag they'd been carrying too long. The therapist gave us resources, plans, next steps. None of it promised miracles. All of it promised support. That night, I began organizing everything. Receipts, bank transfers, text messages, dates scribbled in a notebook. I laid them out on the table like pieces of a puzzle. Each one told a small story. Money sent to help with house expenses, messages asking if Emily was okay that went unanswered, apologies Emily sent for things she hadn't done. Emily hovered nearby, watching, wringing her hands. I didn't want you to worry, she said quietly. I didn't look up. You didn't make me worry. They did. A knock came at the door just after sunset. Emily jumped so hard she nearly knocked over her chair. I was on my feet instantly, my body moving before thought. I opened the door to find 2 officers standing there. One of them I recognized faintly. The other was younger, eyes alert. Ms. Rose? The older one asked. Yes. We're here for a welfare follow-up. Emily appeared behind me, pale but steady. I put my hand on her back, feeling the tension there. They asked gentle questions. They observed. They noted. They didn't accuse. When they left, one of them said quietly, "If you need anything, call. Don't hesitate." The door closed, and Emily exhaled shakily. They're going to be furious. Let them, I said. They didn't wait long. The first call came the next morning. Evelyn's number lit up my phone like a warning flare. I let it ring. Then again. Then again. When I finally answered, I didn't bother with pleasantries. "What do you want?" I asked. Evelyn's voice was cold, controlled. "You've made a serious mistake." "I protected my daughter," I replied. "That's not a mistake." "You've humiliated our family," she snapped. Harold is livid. Ryan hasn't slept. Do you have any idea what you've started? "Yes," I said calmly. "Accountability." She laughed sharply. "You think you can paint us as villains? Emily is unstable. Everyone knows it." My grip tightened on the phone. "Careful," I warned. "Every word you say now matters." She went silent, then hung up. Emily watched me from across the room, fear and hope wrestling on her face. "What did she say?" "That they're scared," I said. Emily shook her head. "They're not scared. They're powerful." "So are we," I replied. "We just haven't used it yet." The days that followed were a blur of preparation. Legal consultations. Therapy sessions. Long talks late at night where Emily cried, raged, and slowly began to remember pieces of herself she'd buried to survive. She started sleeping more. Eating a little better. Sitting by the window in the mornings, watching the world without flinching every time a car passed. Jake checked in often. Sometimes in uniform, sometimes not. He never pushed. Never hovered. He just showed up, steady as a post in the ground. One evening, as snow began to fall again, Emily spoke up suddenly. "I think I want a divorce." The words hung in the air, fragile and brave. I didn't react right away. I let her feel them. "Are you sure?" She nodded slowly. "I don't think I'll survive if I stay." I reached across the table and took her hands. "Then we do it your way. On your timeline." She swallowed hard. "They'll destroy me." "No," I said. "They'll try." The filing happened quietly. No dramatic confrontations. Just paperwork and signatures and a finality that felt both terrifying and freeing. When Ryan was served, his reaction came swiftly and predictably. Angry messages, accusations, threats masked as concern. Emily read them with shaking hands. I sat beside her, grounding her whenever she started to spiral. "They say I'm doing this to punish them," she whispered. "You're doing this to save yourself," I corrected. The court date was set. The waiting began. Rumors started circulating. Whispers at grocery stores. Glances that lingered too long. Boise was small enough that stories traveled fast and rarely stayed accurate. Some people believed Emily was ungrateful. Others believed she was brave. I didn't care which version they chose, as long as Emily didn't have to hear it. The Whitlocks, on the other hand, made sure we heard them. Letters arrived. Legal threats. Subtle warnings about consequences. Each one went into a folder. Each one added weight to the truth they were trying to bury. The night before the hearing, Emily couldn't sleep. She paced the apartment, hands clasped, eyes wide. "I'm scared I'll freeze up," she admitted. "That I won't be able to speak." I stood in front of her and placed my hands on her shoulders, grounding her the way I used to before matches. "Then you don't speak," I said. "Others will. Documents will. Facts will. Silence isn't weakness when the truth is written down." She nodded, breathing slowly. "Will you be there?" I smiled. "Always." The morning of the hearing was bitterly cold. Emily wore a simple coat, her scarf wrapped tight. Her face was pale but determined. As we entered the courthouse, I felt the familiar tension of stepping onto a mat, everyone watching, waiting to see who would falter. Ryan was already there, polished and confident, flanked by his parents. Harold's presence filled the hallway, his gaze sharp and assessing, like a man used to winning without effort. Evelyn's eyes flicked over Emily, dismissive and cold. Abigail wasn't there, but her absence felt deliberate, strategic. Jake sat in the gallery, posture straight, eyes alert. When he caught my eye, he nodded once. Solid. Reliable. As we took our seats, Emily's hand found mine. Her grip was tight, but steady. "I can do this," she whispered. "Yes," I said. "You can." The judge entered. The room rose and settled. Papers shuffled. Voices echoed. This wasn't the end of the fight. But it was the moment Emily stopped running from it. And no matter how hard the Whitlocks tried to bend the world to their will, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. My daughter was no longer alone. And that changed everything. The courtroom smelled faintly of old paper and disinfectant, a sterile blend that did nothing to calm the storm in my chest. Emily sat beside me, spine straight but shoulders tight, her hands folded so carefully in her lap they looked like they might break if she moved them wrong. I could feel the tension radiating off her, a quiet hum of fear she'd learned to hide too well. Across the aisle, Ryan sat with the confidence of a man who had never truly been told no. His suit was tailored, his posture relaxed, his expression composed in a way that suggested this was an inconvenience, not a reckoning. Harold sat behind him, one leg crossed over the other, hands resting calmly on his knee. He looked less like a worried father and more like a spectator at a performance he expected to end exactly as planned. Evelyn leaned in to whisper something to Ryan. He smirked. That smirk made my blood boil, but I kept my face still. Years of coaching had taught me that emotion, when shown too early, only gives your opponent information. I focused on Emily instead. On her breathing. On the way her thumb rubbed the edge of her sleeve in the same nervous motion she'd had as a child before exams. The judge entered, and the room rose as one before settling again. The sound of the gavel echoed, sharp and final, like the opening bell of a match. The proceedings began with formalities, words that felt heavy and distant, but soon enough the substance emerged. Ryan's attorney spoke first, smooth and polished, painting a picture of a marriage strained not by cruelty but by Emily's fragility. He used phrases like emotional instability, exaggerated distress, inability to fulfill marital responsibilities. Each word felt designed to shrink her, to turn her pain into a flaw. I watched Emily closely. Her jaw tightened, but she stayed silent, just as we'd planned. Then it was our turn. Our lawyer stood, calm and deliberate. He spoke of patterns, not incidents. Of isolation, not arguments. Of a woman repeatedly dismissed, humiliated, and placed in physically dangerous situations under the guise of discipline or cooling off. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't dramatize. He let the facts sit where they landed. Emily was called to testify. Her legs trembled as she stood. I wanted to reach out, to anchor her, but I knew this was her moment. She walked to the stand slowly, like someone stepping onto ice, unsure where it might crack. When she spoke, her voice was quiet but clear. She talked about the miscarriages, not in graphic detail, but in their aftermath. The silence, the way grief had been treated like an inconvenience. She talked about dinners where she was ignored, jokes made at her expense, instructions given like orders. She talked about the porch, about the cold, about sitting in that chair and wondering if she deserved to come back inside. Ryan's attorney tried to interrupt. The judge raised a hand. Emily continued. "I started believing I was the problem," she said. "I thought if I just tried harder, I could earn kindness." Her voice wavered, but she didn't stop. "When my mother found me outside that night," she said, "I realized something. I wasn't weak. I was alone. And that was done to me." The room was silent. I saw a few people in the gallery shift uncomfortably. I saw Jake's jaw tighten. I saw Harold's expression harden, his eyes narrowing as if recalculating. Cross-examination was brutal. Ryan's attorney questioned Emily's memory, her mental health, her motives. Suggested she wanted attention. Suggested she was exaggerating. Suggested she was being influenced by me. Emily answered calmly. Simply. Repeatedly. I'm telling the truth. When it was over, she stepped down, knees unsteady. I caught her hand as she sat, feeling the sweat on her palm. You did it, I whispered. She shook her head slightly. It's not over. She was right. Harold was called next. He took the stand with the confidence of a man accustomed to authority. His answers were measured, his tone almost paternal. He framed their behavior as concern, as structure, as expectations placed on a woman who struggled to adapt. When asked about the porch, he shrugged lightly. She stepped outside of her own accord. No one forced her. The lie sat heavy in the room. Then Jake was called. He stood tall, uniform crisp, expression controlled. He testified to what he observed that night: the temperature, the duration, Emily's condition, the note left afterward. He did not speculate. He did not editorialize. He stated facts. Ryan's attorney tried to undermine him, suggesting bias due to a past connection to me. Jake acknowledged it openly. Yes, he said. Ms. Rose was my taekwondo coach years ago. That doesn't change what I saw. The judge watched him carefully. The final arguments were delivered. Words stacked on words. Logic against power. Evidence against influence. Then came the waiting. Days passed. Emily barely slept. She replayed every answer in her head, every look exchanged in that courtroom. I stayed close, cooking, cleaning, filling the silence with small comforts. Jake checked in but gave us space. When the ruling day arrived, the air felt heavier than snow. The judge read the decision slowly, deliberately. The marriage was dissolved. Emily exhaled, a breath she'd been holding for years. But then the rest came. Insufficient evidence to formally establish abuse. Shared assets largely awarded to Ryan due to financial contribution. No further action recommended. Each sentence felt like a door closing. Emily's face went slack, like someone hit from behind. I felt her sag against me. Ryan smiled. Not a wide smile. Just a small, satisfied one, like a man who'd been proven right in his own mind. Evelyn leaned toward Abigail, who had joined them now, and whispered something that made her laugh. Harold nodded once, slow and approving. I stood. The sound of my chair scraping across the floor cut through the room. This isn't justice, I said, my voice shaking despite my effort to control it. This is permission. The judge warned me to sit. I did, but the words burned in my throat long after. Outside the courthouse, reporters hovered. Cameras flashed. Emily shielded her face, overwhelmed. Ryan walked past us, close enough that I could smell his cologne. You should have stayed out of it, he murmured. Now look at her. I took a step forward, fury surging. Jake moved instantly, placing himself between us, his presence firm but non-violent. That's enough, he said. Emily grabbed my arm, her voice breaking. Mom, please. Let's go. So we did. The days that followed felt hollow. Emily barely spoke. She moved like a ghost through the apartment, eyes distant, smile gone. The court had given her freedom, but stripped it of validation. The message was clear: she could leave, but what she endured didn't count. I sat alone at the kitchen table one night, staring at the pile of documents that had failed us. Rage simmered under my skin, hot and relentless. Then my phone buzzed. A message. Not from the Whitlocks. From someone else. I was there. I heard everything. If you're willing to talk, so am I. No name. Just a number. I stared at the screen, heart pounding. Then another message came in. They did this to me too. Not the porch, but the words. The control. The humiliation. I closed my eyes. The truth, I realized, had cracks. And through cracks, light gets in. I typed back. Yes, I wrote. I'm willing. That was the night the fight changed. Not from survival, but to exposure. And this time, the Whitlocks wouldn't be able to keep it quiet. The first meeting happened in a quiet cafe on the edge of town, the kind of place people chose when they didn't want to be noticed. The woman who slid into the chair across from me looked ordinary. Mid-30s, neat coat, tired eyes, but the way she held her cup told me she was bracing herself for something. My name doesn't matter, she said after a long pause. Not yet. I nodded. You control the pace. Her shoulders relaxed a fraction. I married into their circle years ago. Different branches. Same rules. Same smiles. Same punishments if you didn't fit. She spoke carefully at first, then faster, as if the dam had finally cracked. Dinners where jokes were aimed like knives. Concern is used as a leash. Doors locked, invitations withdrawn, money controlled. She'd never been put outside in the cold, but she'd been made invisible, dismissed, blamed for things that went wrong simply because it was convenient. I left, she said. Quietly. I took the loss because fighting them felt impossible. When I saw what happened to your daughter, I recognized the pattern. I listened without interrupting, my hands folded on the table, my heartbeat steady but loud in my ears. When she finished, she looked at me like she was waiting for disbelief. I believe you, I said. Tears filled her eyes, quick and unexpected. No one ever says that. By the end of the week, 2 more messages arrived. Then another. Different voices, same story told with different details. Different years. Different victims. The same structure of control. Emily listened from the couch as I told her, her expression shifting from fear to disbelief to something sharper. They did this to other women, she asked. Yes. She swallowed. Then it really wasn't me. No, I said. It never was. We didn't rush. We learned from the court's indifference. We consulted people who understood exposure, not just litigation. Journalists who asked questions instead of making promises. Advocates who knew how power hid behind respectability. Emily struggled at first. The idea of being seen, really seen, terrified her. She worried about retaliation, about being labeled bitter, about being reduced to a headline. I don't want to be famous for this, she said one night, curled up in the corner of the couch. You won't be, I replied. You'll be honest. That took time. The first article didn't name names. It talked about patterns in prominent families, about emotional abuse disguised as tradition. It quoted anonymous sources. It mentioned a winter incident, a woman left outside as discipline. People noticed. Comments flooded in. Some are angry. Some are dismissive. But many, more than I expected, were familiar with the shape of the story. This happened to my sister. My aunt went through the same thing. Why does everyone pretend this isn't abuse? Emily read every word, hands trembling, heart racing. But she didn't look away. When the second article dropped, names were included. Carefully. Legally. Truthfully. The Whitlocks responded with denials. Statements crafted by professionals. Words like misunderstanding, exaggeration, agenda. They threatened lawsuits. They warned of consequences. None of it stopped the momentum. The story spread because it wasn't new. It was recognizable. More women came forward. Some publicly. Some quietly. Each one added weight, credibility, a chorus that could no longer be dismissed as a single disgruntled voice. Emily watched it all unfold like someone waking from a long, dark sleep. She had moments of panic, nights when she woke shaking, convinced there would be a knock at the door. But those moments passed faster now. She wasn't alone in them anymore. Jake stayed close, always careful not to overstep, always present in the ways that mattered. He helped coordinate statements, connected us with people who knew how to protect sources. He never tried to be a hero. He just kept showing up. One afternoon, Emily surprised me. "I want to speak," she said. I set down the dish I was drying. "Are you sure?" She nodded. "Not to a crowd. Just, on record. I want it to be my words." We prepared carefully. She wrote and rewrote her statement, crossing out apologies, circling truths. When the day came, she sat in front of a small camera in a quiet room, hands folded, voice steady. She didn't shout. She didn't cry. She simply told me what happened. The porch. The words. The way love had been turned into a test she could never pass. When it was published, the reaction was immediate. Some tried to tear her down. They called her weak, dramatic, unstable. The same old script. But they were drowned out. By people thanking her. By people saying, "This happened to me." By people finally naming what they'd been taught to endure. The Whitlocks' world began to shrink. Invitations stopped coming. Boards quietly asked for resignations. Old allies distanced themselves. Power doesn't vanish overnight, but it cracks when enough light hits it. Emily didn't celebrate. She didn't gloat. She watched from a distance, processing, healing, reclaiming herself piece by piece. One morning, months later, she stood in the kitchen making pancakes, humming softly. The sound stopped me cold. I couldn't remember the last time I'd heard her hum. She looked up, caught my expression, and smiled shyly. "Is it okay if I apply for that class? The one at the community center?" My throat tightened. "Of course it is. It's nothing big," she added quickly. "Just something for me." "That's everything," I said. Spring came to Boise slowly, stubborn snow melting into muddy edges, sunlight lingering longer each evening. Emily walked more. I talked more. Laughed, tentatively at first, then with real sound behind it. One evening, we sat on the balcony watching the sky turn gold. "I used to think surviving meant staying," she said quietly. "Now I know it means leaving." I squeezed her hand. "And living." She leaned her head against my shoulder, lighter than she'd been in years. The Whitlocks never apologized. People like them rarely do. But their silence grew louder than any denial. They stopped calling. Stopped threatening. Stopped pretending they'd won. Emily didn't need their acknowledgement anymore. Neither did I. One night, as I packed away old papers, the threats, the court documents, the notes, I hesitated. Then I kept one thing out, the photo of Emily as a child, standing in our kitchen, flour on her nose, smiling like the world was safe. I placed it on the shelf where I could see it every day. Justice hadn't come the way I'd once imagined. It hadn't worn a robe or carried a gavel. It had arrived in pieces, in truth told, in voices joined, in a daughter finding her way back to herself. If you ask me now what I'd do again, the answer is simple. I would knock on that door every time. I would step into the cold. I would choose my daughter over peace that costs her life. Because silence keeps abusers comfortable. And love, real love, never does. This story is fictional, inspired by real experiences shared by many. Names and details have been changed. It's told not to accuse, but to remind anyone reading that what feels unbearable alone can become survivable when spoken aloud. If you're standing in the cold right now, wondering if anyone would open the door for you, know this. Somebody will. And sometimes that somebody is you.